Will the clerk please note those in attendance?
All will be noted.
I mean the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's jump right into item 2A, minutes of the regular city council meeting from January 23rd, 2024. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
A motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 2B, minutes of the city council work session on January 23rd, 2024. I have one correction. It says at the heading that this occurred at the Boatworks Commons Community Room. I believe this occurred in the council chambers. So with that correction, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
The motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Item C, 2C, minutes of the city council staff strategy planning session on January 31st, 2024. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to adoption of the agenda, we have one amendment. We're going to move item 4I, which was set on the consent agenda. That's the resolution granting 2 setback variances for 4556 Highway 61. That will become item 8B under new business. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Go ahead. I have a motion and a second. All those.
Mr. Mayor, just a comment on the consent agenda. I don't want to pull anything off the agenda, but I just want to bring a note to item 4C, resolution adopting the 2024 pay equity report. Just want to flag this. This is a report that we have to file every year with the state of Minnesota, telling them that we are complying with pay equity rules. Been doing it for decades. I don't believe it's necessary. We have to do it because it's a state mandate, but it's I just flag it for interest in terms of a legislative agenda. As we're looking for things that we could tell the legislature, hey, stop sending us mandates that we don't need to worry about, comply with, that don't help anybody. But the staff has to do this report every year. We have to approve it here on this consent agenda. It's a complete waste of time. So with that, I support the consent agenda.
Good. I had a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Item 5A, Community Development Biannual Report. Mr. Lindahl.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, members of the City Council. Included in your packet is the biannual report from the Community Development Department. You received a first half report earlier this year, I believe it was back in August, and now we're presenting information for you for basically comparing that the first and second halves of 2023 and as they look at the whole year. Detailed information is included in the tables in your report. Staff will try to present just a few items here in summary to kind of give you a taste of what's in the report and the activity levels of the Community Development Department. So just as a reminder, the primary duties of the department include long-range planning, like working on the comprehensive plan, short-term planning work that would be development review proposals similar to the couple of planning items that the council is going to look at here in a few items. Project planning for specific projects like the County Road E corridor work and the zoning update process. Zoning administration work, day-to-day conversations about interpreting and administrating the zoning code, working on housing issues, economic development efforts for the city, building plan review and building inspections for the building department, rental inspections for the city's rental housing stock, and code enforcement within the community. Just a couple of the projects that we just kind of talked about in those categories that we worked on over 2023 would be the both the tobacco and cannabis ordinance work, the County Road E, kind of going down the list in each column here, the County Road E redevelopment site, who is now seeking grant funds from the state to work on soil corrections before beginning that project. The picture of the of North Campus, including the vast amount of work that's included all over the campus, but also specifically the expansion of the bleacher seating around the state football field. Top of the next column, that is the gym expansion for the middle school. Below that in the middle is the Lochner apartment building, or the second phase of the Barnum, as it's probably more known to the rest of the community. While the planning work for that occurred a number of years ago, it's going through the building permit, or excuse me, the building inspection process as we speak. Last slide in that middle column is the redevelopment of the former clinic site, health clinic site on the southern end of Bel Air that was turned into a Montessori preschool and daycare. Upper right-hand column, as we mentioned, County Road E corridor work that continues at this time. In the middle, the zoning ordinance update, again, which is ongoing. And while handled mostly by the engineering department, the planning and community development department is assisting in the downtown mobility study. So taking a specific look at the building inspections, or building division of it, they do all building permit review and permit inspections throughout the city. They do all commercial, residential, and institutional construction projects in both White Bear Lake and Matamidi. In 2023, we saw just over 4,800 permits come through the city's inspection department, and with a valuation of just over $2.2 million and permit fees of just over $1.9 million. Looking at the trend in this building inspection data that we just talked about over the last 10 plus years or so, we see a steady trend of increasing activity for the number of building permits in both Matamidi and White Bear Lake, and then the overall trend tends to be, again, on the upward swing. What we have seen, though, is a spike in 2022, and we are seeing a slight downward trend after that. You'll see that continued in some of the other slides we're talking about. Basically, that we're attributing that to the spike with the Lochner apartment building and the school district's investment in not only North Campus, but in a number of sites throughout the community. If you look at total valuations, as we summarized in that first slide, again, we see an upward trajectory with spikes again in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Again, those basically we attribute to the higher value of the school districts and Lochner investment in the community. Finally, in the building division, looking at fees collected throughout that time, again, we see a substantial increase in 2021, 2022, and 2023, again, contributing that more directly related to the higher value investments in those sites that I mentioned in both the school district and the Lochner site. Generally, though, in 2023, you'll see in these three sides, we're seeing what we think is the beginning of at least a downward trend to a more traditional level of investment in the community. And so while that's a downward trend from the last couple of years, we see it more, again, returning to more of a traditional path and a historic path in the community. Next, in the community development report, you'll see some tables that summarize the code enforcement activity throughout the community in 2023 and comparing it with also 2022. But at least in summary, in 2023, we saw just over 443 code enforcement cases throughout the community. The highest or the largest category related to motor vehicle activity, and that is expired tabs, junk vehicles, and the like throughout the community. You might see that there's also a separate parking category. That really has to do with where cars are parked and if they're parked in appropriate surfaces and locations, either in residential or commercial areas. So that's the distinction between those things. Taking a look at the activity by ward throughout the community in 2023, you see basically a pretty even distribution of the code enforcement activity throughout the 5 wards in the community. And that is a combination of, just to note, there's a combination of the complaint-based activity that occurs in the community that the city, doesn't initiate, but then there is the actual initiated work on behalf of the city that's done proactively through the inspections throughout the community. And even with these two different factors, you basically see that there's a pretty even distribution of the code enforcement activity throughout the community. And then finally, the topic we look at is zoning activity throughout 2023. And there's a table in your packet that compares the first half and second half of that data. Overall, what I would say is, what I think we see is if you look at individual categories in here, which include signs, zoning permits, building permit review by the zoning administrator, zoning letters that review things and the like, administrative variances, land use cases, questions and inquiries, meetings and inspections, and then that small miscellaneous category. What you basically see is pretty even activity in the first half and the second half of the year, with the exception of the questions and inquiries section. So what we generally see is a little bit of a slowdown in the second half of the year as you go in kind of through November and December and through the holiday season. But in this case, we saw substantially higher amounts in the second half of the year. Some of that may be just the fact that we're having a little bit warmer weather and there was more questions and activity in the community. We're not really, some of that may be a leading indicator to some more activity that's coming in 2024. We're really not sure about what that shows. But overall, again, in individual categories and for the first and second half of the year, we see pretty even numbered in those activities. So that summarizes the information in the community development report at a high level, but I'd be happy to take any questions that the council may have.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Lindahl. Council, do we have any questions? Very good. We appreciate the report. I want to go back just a second to correct something. I had asked for a motion and a second on the adoption of the agenda. Councilmember Walsh made a few comments. We approved the agenda, but I want to go back and make sure that we have a motion and a second on the consent agenda itself. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now the consent agenda has been adopted. All right, item 5B, Sports Center Annual Report. Ms. Crawford, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to give a high overview of the Sports Center. If you have questions, I likely will need to go get those answers because I'm not the expert here. But it was a good year for the Sports Center. We had 7 youth hockey tournaments, 13 high school hockey games, the 30th annual Holiday Open Figure Skating Competition, and that brought about 350 skaters to the area, which generated a record-breaking revenue for the Sports Center this year, so that's exciting. And then we had 3 spring ice skating shows, as we always do, and approximately 100 White Bear Lake Area Hockey Association youth games. Some notable improvements. One on your screen is the Hockey Day Minnesota puck wall. So those are all the donors for Hockey Day Minnesota, and we get to display that at the Sports Center. Next slide. Some facility improvements that we have made in the Sports Center, that is the lobby of the Sports Center. So you can see it's been redone. I don't have a before picture, but anyone who's been there knows that that's a pretty good upgrade from what we had. We also replaced the rubber flooring in the 3 locker rooms and the player boxes. We added 4 additional security cameras, we have installed solar panels on the roof. We had quite a bit of a setback with that installation. We're working on remedy, and that'll be done later this spring. But we found the framework for the panels mounted on the roof were found to be defective last fall. So that will be fixed soon, we hope. I think next slide. Okay. Well, before I get there, after 22 years, Charlie Holman, who was our maintenance technician, retired from the sports center. So sad to see him go. Happy for him to retire. And we filled that position with Chad Jameson, who comes from Drake Arena in St. Paul, with over 12 years of experience and lives right here in White Bear Lake and could, I think, walk to the sports center. So he's really enjoying working at the Sports Center, and we love having him. In your packet is the revenues. Inadvertently didn't include expenses, so I apologize about that. We'll get that corrected for next time. But ice rental and revenue remains steady over the last year. Live barn remains a source of revenue, but we are seeing it reducing, especially from the pandemic. And then we had been supplementing the sports center with ARPA funds. That allocation completed in 2022. So, but it certainly was helpful over the pandemic for the sports center. But I'm not doing all of it justice. We'll have Bruce here next time to give you a better, more thorough update. But they're doing great things at the sports center. So, thank you.
Great. Well, we'll extend our congratulations and thanks to Mr. Holman for his 22 years of service, and welcome Mr. Jameson to the community, or at least to the Sports Center. Questions for Ms. Crawford on the Sports Center? All right, thank you again. Item 6, public hearings. We have nothing scheduled. Item 7, unfinished business, nothing scheduled. Item 8A, conditional use permit for 2505 Lake Avenue. Mr. Lindahl, whenever you're ready.
Mayor, members of the council, as you mentioned, the item before you is a conditional use permit request for the property at 2505 Lake Avenue. The property is guided by the comprehensive plan as low-density residential and zoned R2 single family, and also within the shoreline overlay zone for White Bear Lake. The applicants, Annie and Dustin Carlson, are requesting a conditional use permit for a third curb cut on their property. The Planning Commission reviewed this item at their meeting earlier, last month in January, and there were no comments through that particular part of the application. However, recently, just this week, we did receive one comment from a neighbor that's been included and provided to the council supporting the request. After reviewing the application and hearing from staff, the Planning Commission recommended denial of this application. Just as a way of a little bit of quick background for the application, back in June of 2022, the applicant sought approvals for variances and a conditional use permit for an addition to their home and an accessory dwelling unit to be part of their detached garage. They added 2 cars attached garage to the principal structure, and again expanded their existing garage from the number of stalls and added the accessory dwelling unit on the second level of that. Those applications were approved by the council, and so the applicant subsequently went on to seek a building permit consistent with those land use approvals, and that was approved administratively by the Planning and Zoning Department in August of 2022. As part of that application, you'll see the rendering for the accessory dwelling unit as it would be proposed to face Stillwater Avenue, and just the staff would note that as part of that application, either at the land use level or at the building permit level, the garage door and curb cut that's the subject of tonight's request weren't part of those approvals or plans. The applicant began work on that curb cut prior to any city review or permits. At this point, they were requesting a 12-foot curb cut. Included in your application packet tonight is a note from the applicant that states the reasons that they're requesting the additional curb cut and driveway access at this point. I will certainly be happy to answer questions about that, but the applicant is also present and can certainly make their presentation about those findings on their end from them when they address you. The additional curb cuts, again, were not permitted as part of the ADU. And again, just as a way of follow-up here, you see in the lower right-hand corner of the screen an actual picture of the the detached garage with the ADU above it. And circled in red is the location where the single-stall garage door and curb cut have been placed on the building. So in looking at the findings for this application, you would see that the proposed curb cut is not compliant with the standards laid out in the zoning code. As a matter of fact, specifically related to the conditional use permit process for an ADU. That the standards for accessory dwelling units specifically say that separate driveway and curb cuts are not allowed for ADUs. It's generally inconsistent with the neighborhood design of the curb cuts and the access points for the surrounding properties. And the engineering department is generally not supportive of the proposal. More specifically, looking at the findings point by point in your staff report, looking at the 6 findings that are, conditional use permit criteria and the findings related to those. The first one, again, consistency with the comprehensive plan. Staffs find that it is not consistent with the comprehensive plans. The comprehensive plan lays out land use and transportation policies, and in this case, staff doesn't believe it's consistent with either one of those. The land use policies specifically talk about the low-density residential neighborhood character of the neighborhood, and the accompanying zoning categories for that land use category generally limit single-family neighborhoods to a single curb cut. And the transportation section of the comprehensive plan talks about limiting access management for safety and efficient transportation systems. Looking more consistent, specifically at the land uses around the site, both presently and in the future, and whether or not that request is compatible with that. Again, the staff finds no, that it is not. The single family area, again, typically is limited to a single curb cut. The third criteria looks at whether or not the proposal complies with the zoning and performance standards. Again, staff in this case finds no, it does not. Specifically relating back to that standard for accessory dwelling units that says they're not allowed to have separate curb cut and access points. Fourth, looking at whether or not the proposal will tend to or depreciate the surrounding areas. In this case, we believe that there is a potential to do that. In this case, again, looking at the surrounding neighborhood, just consistent with the character of that and the number of curb cuts they have. In this case, a third curb cut would be inconsistent with the surrounding character and have the potential to be different in those areas. Fifth, we look at can the use be accommodated with existing services or will potentially cause an overburden of city services. In this case, the third curb cut was again started without a permit, and so its design could potentially impact how the city provides services without going through that specific permitting process. And then finally, traffic generated within the city and whether or not it meets the capacity of the streets. And in this case, again, the additional curb cut is specifically prohibited for the standards for ADUs, and the engineering department is generally not supportive of the additional curb cut. So based on those findings, both staff and the Planning Commission are recommending a denial of this application, and we'd stand for questions.
I understand the applicant, Mr. Carlson, is here. If you'd like to briefly make your case and let us know what your thinking is, the podium is yours, please.
Council, thanks for taking the time tonight. City employees, I appreciate it. You guys have been incredibly helpful with this 2-year-long project. It's been big. It's a long story, kind of pretty short. I'll try to keep this pretty simple. You're right, we did start a curb cut without the city approval. And in fact, that wasn't me, that was my stepfather. We've all had circumstances where you had to bail out family, and my wife and I was able to bail out some family and keep grandma and grandpa around, and we took a vacation, we came back, and the curb was cut. And we told them explicitly not to, we're gonna wait till springtime, went to the driveway. So we apologized, and we actually brought it to the city's attention. It wasn't like the city busted us. Like, we stopped right away, said, hey, sorry, we made a mistake, he did this without permission, we wanna let you know. Where do we go from here, right? And then we had no idea that this would even be a big deal on a 1.5 acre lot. That's my mistake. We weren't aware of a property so large would have so many restrictions, put upon it. So of course, there was 8 reasons why the city and the city employees and majority of the planning commission doesn't want this to be done, right? And I don't know if I have time to go through all 8. You guys have a pretty busy agenda, so I'll probably keep this pretty short here, okay? But long story, we'll try to make this really quick, was my philosophy with this whole project is the ADUs, which were designed in late 90s, early 2000s, which were really popular in California, East Coast, not real common in Minnesota. Most cities, in fact, I couldn't find another city that doesn't allow ADU driveway. I don't know where that came from. I talked to previous mayors, previous administration. They kind of grasped at it. They didn't really give me a definitive answer why a driveway is not allowed to an ADU, except that the single-use family lot size that we have is considered the same as every downtown White Bear Lake lot. So a typical downtown White Bear Lake lot is what, 15,000, 18,000 square feet, give or take? We're at 64,000 for part of our lot. Plus we have another 1/3 acre across the street. So our lot is dramatically different than what the ADUs were designed for. If we picture the ADUs, single driveway, single car garage, beautiful little 800 square foot apartment above it. I love it, it's great, and that makes sense. I understand council, mayor, you guys have put together rules and ordinances that we should all follow as city, citizens. And I agree with you completely, but that's where variances are designed for. This is extenuating, it's different, it's not typical. The lot isn't typical, it's massive compared to every other potential ADU. There's not a single driveway that goes from 96 to Stillwater Street. It doesn't exist. The city does say that our neighbors don't have multiple curb cuts. In fact, a neighbor 4 doors down on one side has 2. They're right next to each other. A neighbor 2 doors to my west has 2 as well. And their driveways don't go front to back. So the difference in this property and the uniqueness of the property is the reason we think it should be approved. It's big, it's massive, we have tons of space. We talked to all the neighbors were fine with it. I do understand the future, and the city's like, I don't want to deal with this because this future headache with 3 curb cuts could be bad. But when you look at it, and you look at the 2030 comprehensive plan, there's nothing about curb cuts in the comprehensive plan. It doesn't exist. It doesn't say that there's 3 curb cuts isn't allowed. Like, I was part of that process in 2007. I've read it a number of times. I can't find it, except because the city doesn't want to allow it. If the city doesn't allow it, I understand it, but that's what variances are for. And so we're hoping that we can get a variance and kind of finish this up. And lastly, the reason we switched up the project on the fly, one, we used to live in Hugo, Wild West, I know, okay? Moving to White Bear Lake, a little more rules we weren't aware of. But if you look at the house, and you can see the little carriage house that we built, the back side was this one big wall, and it didn't look good. It didn't look right. It didn't look like the community. right? So we wanted to do something different. The contractor brought it up and says, hey, let's put a little garage in here, let's put a little driveway in here. You can use it for fishing, for boats down the line. Grandma, grandpa can have access to it. It looks better, it's safer, and it has a future purpose. We weren't aware of the curb cut rules that were in place. So we apologize for that, but we think it looks better, we think it adds more function, we think the neighbors like it, and we think the lot supports it. And in fact, our first CUP, we split up the lot. There's 4 potential lots. In fact, we could have put 4 driveways on in theory if we wanted to do it, and we're not asking for that. So we're asking for blessing, we're apologizing for a mistake, we stopped everything, and we'd love to finish it up and make it look how it's supposed to look. And we just don't think it has a lot of downside with value. I don't know where that comes from. And the safety, like when they talked about the plows, they said the curb cut is in the right of way and could create a burden in the city's snow plowing service capacity if you have a third curb cut. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine we're the only curb cut that's ever gonna be built again in White Bear Lake. I think there's plenty more curb cuts that are gonna happen. So I just think that it's something we could hopefully overcome, work together, and get her done. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Appreciate that. Just for a refresher for my edification, perhaps if the city attorney could just help me understand, so I have it right in my head, what the legal criteria is for the conditional use permit, how much discretion this body has. If you could do that, that would be helpful.
Sure, Mr. Mayor and Council. As staff indicated in the staff report, and those of you that sat through my new council member orientation recall me talking about the difference between policy decisions and quasi-judicial decisions. So when this happens to fall in that category of quasi-judicial decisions, CUPs are presumably granted because you went through the policy process and you said that these things are allowed in our city with the issuance of a CUP. And obviously you have discretion to place conditions on that permit to mitigate any potential impacts on neighbors. But that's generally what we're looking at. Again, there's a presumption that they're going to be granted unless you have specific reasons not to. Here in this particular case, it butts, the issue that we're talking about really butts up against that one line in the section of the code that says a driveway is not permitted for this ADU. So that's really what you're butting up against. And so really, a denial of a CUP, I think that's fine. If this were to be granted, I would see this as perhaps an amended CUP and a variance, as the speaker indicated. So, long story short, Mr. Mayor, you do have some discretion here, but it would be more in the sense of exercising your discretion to overcome that language in the code that says no additional driveway for an ADU. I hope that answers it for you.
It does. Thank you. Well, let me just briefly share my thoughts and open up to the council. I had the opportunity this afternoon to look at that stretch, and the difficult thing that I'm grappling with is I have all the respect in the world for city staff working through, what are we trying to do? There are wide-angle lens, not just on a case-by-case basis, because it's easier for me to look at the property, which is huge, and it seemingly fits from an aesthetic standpoint, and I understand why the homeowner wanted it. Makes sense. But I do place a lot of deference in what city staff is doing, because they're doing this for 12,000 plus single-family homes and 25,000 residents. So that's what I grapple with. In an ideal world, if we could do whatever we want, I don't see what the harm is, except for the precedent setting, and then what applicant tomorrow, what do they want? So it's a tough one. Land use situations like this always are, because we want to be as accommodating to the homeowner who we're appreciative is investing in the community and investing in their property, and which in turn increases tax revenue so that we can fulfill the city services. But I've been the one who's been as vocal as anyone about making sure we're consistent with variances, with CUPs, with anything land use, so that residents have some predictability when they go to apply for applications for various things. So. And we don't get a lot of split decisions in the Planning Commission, which I think is good. So they don't make it on the consent agenda for that reason, and it falls to this body to grapple with. And that's why I wanted our city attorney to talk it through a little bit, so that we're making sure we're making good legal decisions. So those are my initial comments for the council. what we'd like to do with this application. Councilmember Hughes.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I do have a couple of thoughts. One of them is I also drove by there, and it appears it's already in use. I guess I don't know that it is or it's not, but it kind of, you said you stopped right away, and it looks like, I mean, I could be wrong because I didn't watch anybody drive in, but there are railroad tracks going right into the door. Okay. Right. But what I'm saying is, I don't know at what point the stop work requirement was put on there by city staff, but it looks particularly cleaned up and not like work had actually kind of stopped and a hammer had been put down. And the only reason I bring that up is because, it's a, well, it sounds petulant. It's a law. You were told not to do it, and then you went ahead and did it anyway. And it gets kind of to the point of like, if we make any kind of decision tonight, is it actually going to be paid attention to by you? And I don't know. But regardless, putting that aside, I get to the point where, the code does actually say no driveway to an ADU. And why is that? And that's where I've been working around in my head. Why is that? And it's, I came to, and I don't know what the rest of you guys think, that because it stops an ADU from being a secondary home on a single-family lot. You then have to use the homeowner's driveway. You have to use the homeowner's things. You still have to negotiate with the homeowner. You don't drive into a secondary entrance, never walking onto the homeowner's property, which keeps the ADU in some ways underneath the roof of the lot owner who's there. Now, having said that, not everybody lives in the property that they sit on. People rent houses all the time. But it would, I think, if we start moving down this way, speak to the precedent of now we're going to have ADUs with secondary driveways, which are effectively single-family homes on single, becomes in a multifamily lot on a single-family lot. I recognize, we have a situation where we have a really huge lot. And then I guess I'd just say if this doesn't get approved, then split up your lot or take down one of your driveways and put the one where you really want it, since that's already there in code. That's also a big deal. I know I'm not saying go buy something simple, but that's what I was grappling with. Is it really that big of a deal? No. I mean, it's 10 feet of concrete. It's nothing. But it really is more the precedent of is this where we are? Are big lots going to be allowed to put a secondary home on it and have their own driveway and have their own section in a lot that doesn't get split? And basically, neighbors have no say in that at that point, right? Or do we not? And that's where I'm struggling. So I actually would welcome all of your thoughts on that.
Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things that I'm not clear about. I'm looking at the maps, and I'm having trouble finding where the third curb cut is, and trying to figure out if there is one of them that can be decommissioned, whether that makes any sense at all. I don't know.
Third one's off of 96 because it's bookended by 96 and Stillwater.
Can you point at them? Can somebody point at them?
Well, so the yellow that you can barely see is the new curb cut.
Yellow one is the new one, okay.
Yeah.
Got it, thank you. So the topic of ADUs is one that I've become aware of in the past year or two. And I'm really intrigued by what ADUs might be useful for in this community, but we haven't studied it. We haven't had those conversations. All of my learning has been on my own and through observation in other places. So none of it is grounded in our policy, our historic orientation to when is it permitted, why is it not, the implications for multifamily housing on a single family lot, that type of stuff. We haven't had any of that conversation. I do know that the zoning redrafting committee is going to take up that conversation, and I don't know if I'm okay. So That's a forum that might be coming, and so there's a part of me that says, is this a part of that conversation to come? Can we take up as part of our zoning conversation, or either reconsideration or reconciliation of our thinking and our policy around ADUs, parking, approvals, ingress, egress, all that kind of stuff. And that kicks it down the road, but that is an active activity, and Mr. Lindahl, we're going to be taking that up in the next 2, 3, 4 months, something like that?
Mayor, members of the council, that'll be part of the discussion that happens as the code is drafted over the rest of this year. So the goal is really to have that done by the end of the year approximately, and the exact timing of when that would occur in the discussion is yet to be determined.
Okay, fair enough. So what's in my head is that I'm not sure if we were to have that policy conversation, would we come up with the same rule that there shall be no curb cut for an ADU? Would we adopt, would we reaffirm? Would we modify based on conversation? And I don't know. Those are the things that I'm weighing in my head. None of which becomes an easier, immediate solution to Mr. Carlson's request.
Councilmember West.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same things you both were mentioning. And I also had a question for the city staff, if I'm able to. One of the reasons why we do variances and why we're looking at the zoning code is if something happens over and over again, does the zoning need to be changed? That's right?
Mayor, members of the council, yes.
Okay. Is something like this something that's happened before?
Mayor, members of the council, I'm not aware that we've had, well, let me preface this by saying, generally speaking, it's my understanding that in the recent history of the city, we do periodically get requests for additional curb cuts, okay? 1 to maybe 2, okay? That's more common. And there is some provision in our code to allow that in certain situations. Corner lots, busier streets where you need a horseshoe kind of access, okay? So really, that's what the provision that the applicant is using here tonight is intended to address, okay? To be more specific to this request, I think, in your question, is whether or not we've received requests to do additional curb cuts for ADUs. No, I'm not aware that we've had those recently.
And the other thing is, I was on the planning commission before here, and it is, I think, problematic to make an action that's against the code before talking to, and I appreciate your apology, and you can't control other people, and I totally get that, but it makes it really hard for us to make a decision when it isn't planned out ahead of time and worked in partnership with the city. Thank you.
Councilmember Walsh.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would reiterate some of what Councilmember Hughes said. It's an accessory dwelling unit, and help me now. We, meaning I was on the council when we put this accessory dwelling unit code in the first place. This is not that old. We did not have this in code pre-2015, and I think sometime after that, 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there, we put this in. So we haven't, it hasn't been that long since we've discussed this policy and put this into the city code. And I kind of come down in the same place. It's an accessory dwelling unit. The word accessory is key there. So there's a reason we decided not to have driveways and garages for accessory dwelling units. I think you articulated it well. It needs to be it's different. And if the lot is large, which this one is, then there are other things we can do within the code to handle more housing, more driveways, more cars, more parking with a large lot. So it seems to me we ought to honor the decisions in the code for accessory dwelling units and not go that route tonight.
Yeah, 1 second. Just to echo what Councilmember Walsh said, and this is more about what Councilmember Edberg brought up. I would welcome that conversation. I think for tonight it's difficult because I wish we had flexibility within the code as it pertains to driveways and curb cuts for accessory dwelling units, because whether we do it down the road or eventually, I think we should have a conversation about nuances with lot size. So for example, if you've got a very small downtown Wiper Lake lot and it's a 50-foot stretch of road frontage and it has an ADU, that probably is not a good candidate for a second curb cut. If it's a large lot, which we don't have a lot of, I think we need to have some flexibility. I don't think that helps Mr. Carlson out tonight, but what I grapple with is having good policy, and it's good, and having ordinances and having everything kind of working well, but then not having the flexibility to try to avoid an absurd result when nuances come up. Mr. Carlson's lot is very unique in White Bear Lake in that it is so large. I don't know a lot of lots other than corner lots that have roads on two sides, but not front yard and backyard like this property. So it is different. And again, I think the council's decision tonight is ultimately to deny, but recognizing that in a situation like this, we should give some thought into how we want to address this going forward, because I think we do need flexibility and the ability to recognize that there are some variations in different lots, and we need to keep a close eye on that. So as we're continuing updating our zoning code and different land use code, we need to address that. So with that, any other, Ms. Crawford?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Lindahl, the garage door that was installed, is that accessible from the existing driveway? Is it, so can you drive north into it?
Mayor, members of the council, the driveway, you're asking about the garage door on the Stillwater side of the building?
No, not the Stillwater side.
The internal,
yes.
internal to the site? Those are accessible only from the existing curb cut. Does that answer your question?
So I think so. My question is the ADU accessible, is the new garage accessible from the existing internal driveway?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So it's accessible from Stillwater as well as the existing driveway?
Correct.
Okay.
Council, can I make one more comment? Do you guys mind? Be quick.
Very briefly, go ahead.
Councilman Hughes, I appreciate your stop order. Just so you know, we didn't do anything after they told us not to, or I told you guys we did it. Just so we didn't do anything. So it's not like but they park in there, of course. The driveway, the garage, the accessory dwelling unit, the reason we have garages on both sides, ADUs don't last forever. I don't know how old all your parents are, and they're not going to be here forever. That won't be an ADU forever. In fact, the ADUs have to be renewed every year, right? Isn't that part of the deal? If I remember reading it right, I think so, right?
No, I think only if you rent it.
Only if you rent it. Well,
So I have an
they're living
ADU.
for free. But anyways, the ADU, it's not going to be there forever. It's a garage, and eventually it's going to be a pull-through for boat storage, jet ski storage, things like that. So the practicalness of it, the common sense of it, of a drive-through garage, made sense. And so we're doing these ADUs. If it was a garage and not an ADU, would it be any different? The ADU law wouldn't fit. It'd just be a garage. So that's all I want you to think about. It's like, it's going to be a garage someday. It won't be an ADU. It'll be a big workout space whenever grandma and grandpa pass on. Right? So this is temporary. We thought it made sense. We apologize for any inconvenience we caused, but, one size government, one size decisions for everything is hard to swallow.
Thank you. All right, council, we have a resolution before us that denies the conditional use permit for a third curb cut at 2505 Lake Ave. What would we like to do with this?
I'll move the resolution.
And just to clarify, Councilmember Walsh, we're moving the updated resolution that has additional predicates in there. Did everyone get a copy of that?
The electronic packet does have the updated, yes.
That's the resolution that you're moving,
I'll move
Councilmember Walsh.
approval.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Councilmember Edberg.
I'm going to support the motion. I'm also going to support conversation as part of our zoning discussion to try and understand this policy in greater detail and additional contexts.
Very good. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah,
Councilmember Hughes.
Mr. Lindahl, if you would go to that final parting comment, what would the situation be if this was just a third curb cut for a pull-through garage?
Mayor, members of the council, so again, the zoning standards, as I mentioned in general, state that if you're a single-family house, you are entitled, you get, without question, one access point. And we have a conditional use permit process to allow additional curb cuts, which is what we're talking about here. The vast majority of the use of that tool is for a second curb cut in the situations that I talked about. So under the hypothetical, or the future use of the property that Mr. Carlson has laid out, if it was an ADU and it didn't have a curb cut, and then down the road it was just a garage, and the property owner came in and said, well, I want to put an access point in here, they would still be going through this same process. There just wouldn't be a specific provision related to the ADU. Although I guess I would offer, even if it isn't used at a certain point for an ADU, I mean, an apple is an apple. You don't turn it into an orange afterwards. It would still be a second floor that had a bedroom and a living space and a bathroom and a livable space to it. And so even if it was used as only a garage, there would be nothing that prevented this or any future property owner from using it as an ADU.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor of approving the updated resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution carries, denying the conditional use permit. All right, item 8B, a resolution granting 2 setback variances for 4556 Highway 61. Mr. Lindahl.
Mayor, members of the City Council, again, the item that you just mentioned, request 2 side yard setback variances from the property at 4556 Highway 61. Included in your packet are some comments from the neighboring property to this property, from an attorney representing that property owner with some concerns about the impact that this redevelopment of this site could have on that property. The attorney spoke at the Planning Commission, outlined their concerns, so it was part of the record from the Planning Commission, moved on to the City Council. And as I understand it, well, I know that we have an updated letter from the attorney that's been distributed to the council, and they are in the audience tonight assuming they want to address the council on their concerns. The Planning Commission, again, reviewed this item at their January meeting, and both staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval of these variances. In this case, this property is guided low-density residential by the comprehensive plan. It is zoned R2 single-family residential, and within the Shoreland Overlay District. Included in your packet and up on the screen here is a survey of the existing lot as it is today, and the outline of the house that's existing, again, as it is today on the lot. For illustrative purposes, again, by contrast, also included in your packet is a proposed survey that shows a west side yard setback of 3.36 feet and an east side yard setback of 6 feet. Generally, just again as a point of reference, this zoning district requires 15-foot side yard setbacks, but the surrounding neighborhood is very consistent in the layout that you see here and what's proposed. Included in your plan, also in your packet again, is this graphic that shows the different floor plans for the home. So it includes a basement and lower level that's finished, a main level that includes kitchen and storage areas, and then an upper level with 3 bedrooms, or a second story in this case. Part of the concerns that have been raised and quite by the applicant, but also by staff as we reviewed the process, is how drainage would work on the site post-reconstruction. So the applicant has provided a plan here with elevations that show how the site will drain either towards Highway 61 or towards the lake. The applicant has also agreed to the condition that they place gutters on the house that will funnel runoff from the roof into the drainage pattern that we've just talked about. Just to give you a sense of the development entitlement to this particular lot, given its width and the required 15-foot setbacks of the zoning code, the illustration here shows a very narrow buildable area on the lot, which again is necessitating the applicant seeking these variances. The city code requires a minimum of a 22-foot wide house. And so while the applicant's proposing a 24.5-foot wide house, so slightly bigger, it's still with the zoning on the site and the required 15-foot setbacks, that would not allow the applicant to build the required minimum width of a house. To give you again a sense of the surrounding neighborhood, you'll see that many of the lots again have that 30-foot width kind of at the point where they touch the lake and branch out to get slightly wider as they then transition towards Highway 61. But you'll see a very consistent pattern in the half a dozen to 8 lots that are in this particular area along White Bear Lake and Highway 61. Taking a specific look at the variance criteria and the findings staff were made that are outlined in your staff report. Just as a reminder, the variance criteria that are included in our analysis here are based on state standards. They're actually in state statute. They aren't a standard that White Bear Lake or any other community can set on their own. So these 5 review criteria are the ones laid out in statute that are designed to help answer the question whether or not there is a practical difficulty, the legal term practical difficulty, with a property that prevents an applicant from meeting those standards. So in that context, again, while the zoning, the setback standards or the height or the parking requirements are all things that individual communities, White Bear Lake or any other community, set for themselves. But when you seek to deviate or vary from those standards, we are required by state law to look at this practical difficulty test. And it's the same in Duluth, in White Bear Lake, in Wilmer, in Rochester, as it is in White Bear Lake. So looking at those criteria, The first one is the variance in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance? And in this case, staff does find that it is. It's consistent with the purpose and intent statement that allows for single-family homes, and it's consistent with the other performance standards in the R2 district, specifically related to height, the amount of impervious surface coverage it has, and the use as a single-family dwelling. They are asking where it isn't consistent for approval of this variance for this side yard setbacks. It's actually, and I'm sorry, I actually should note, it's also consistent with the setback requirements from Highway 61 and the lake. It's only asking for these 2 side yard setback variances. Secondly, you look at, is the variance consistent with the 2040 comprehensive plan? And again, we look there at what the comprehensive plan provides for guidance in the low-density residential category. It states that in this category, you can have a single-family residential home, that use is allowed, and it also creates a density range of 3 to 9 units per acre. As the lot is designed and the home is proposed, it meets a 1 unit basically 1 to 4 units, so it's 1 unit per 4 acres. If you look at the third standard, is does the proposal put the property to use in a reasonable manner? Again, staff finds that it does. And again, a single-family residential dwelling is a reasonable use based on the guidance that we have in the future land use of the comprehensive plan and the zoning that allows for single-family homes in this location. Fourth, are there unique circumstances of the property not created by the landowner? Again, the applicant or the staff and the planning commission found in this case that it does. The narrow lot does not allow for the minimum required house, as I mentioned, at 22 feet. And so without variances, they would not be able to meet the minimum required house and what is arguably a minimum kind of reasonable width for a house. And then fifth and finally, we look at, will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? And in this case, staff finds that it wouldn't, for the reasons that we've talked about. If you looked at the aerials that we talked about, you look at the number of lots on either side of this in this fairly limited space between 61 and White Bear Lake and south of 96 and north of the Boatworks Commons development area. The lots in this area are very consistent in size, minimum of 30 feet down towards the lakeside and expand slightly as they get wider towards Highway 61. So the development envelope and design, scale, height, and general position of the house is consistent with this area right around this particular, the applicant's location. So based on these 5 findings, staff and the Planning Commission were recommending approval of this request, and I'd stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lindahl. I know the applicants are here tonight. We have received the communications that you have sent. If you or your attorney want to speak very briefly on this, I know you had a chance at the Planning Commission, but I will make the podium available for you. I'm sorry. Yeah, the applicants are those that have objected. I guess it's really those that have objected to the application. We have your, my apologies, we have your written material if you'd like to say anything, but I think the council has received it and we have read it. Go ahead. I wasn't aware that you wanted to say anything tonight, but if you would like to, you're more than welcome to. Absolutely. I don't mean to put you on the spot. The way this works is you guys are the applicants. It's already been approved by the Planning Commission. That's what's before us. But there is this is a unique situation. So we would hear for your neighbors to the south, and if you want to say anything or speak to this, please do.
Mayor, council members, my name is Chad Lemons. I represent the Millers. And I didn't mean to stop. I don't want to step on the McDonald's at all. So that's why I wanted to wait. I'll come right to the point. the existing home represents a reasonable use of the property. It may not be the use McDonald's want, but it is a reasonable use of the property. The existing home is a non-conforming use, which was built in 1920. Because of its age, it's a legal non-conforming use, which can continue which can continue. Now, if you want to modify a non-conforming use, that's governed by section 1302.010 of your code. And under that code, so I'm referring to subdivision 2E, a single-family home, which is what this is, can be modified. In fact, it states can be expanded to improve livability. However, there has to be a conditional use permit granted, and the nonconformance can't be increased. In this case, the nonconformance would be increased due to the length of the new house. What should have happened here, is my position, is that this should have been treated as a nonconforming use, and that a conditional use permit should have been applied for, and the standards under 1302.010 subdivision E should be applied, not a variance. One other point I want to make is that the unique circumstances here are being created by the McDonald's by tearing down the existing home. This is not an existing unique circumstance. This would be a new unique circumstance created by the applicant. And under statute and case law, you cannot create your own unique circumstance. What should be happening here is the existing home should be rehabilitated and restored. At the Planning Commission meeting, as the Millers pointed out, and I pointed out on their behalf, we are more than willing to cooperate with the restoration of the existing home. We have no problem with that whatsoever. In fact, we look forward to the home being restored. But what should happen is a restoration of the existing home, and a conditional use permit should be applied for under your non-conforming use. Now, you've already seen our issues about what our concerns are, so I'm not going to go over those. Just want to highlight two of them. One is we are concerned about the fact that the new home will be 2 stories, whereas the existing home is only 1 story. Given the narrow space between the 2 houses, I think that poses a definite safety hazard for the firefighters in the event a fire broke out on either house. Second point is this. Right now, the Millers have sunlight coming across from the north. That will, northeast, I should say. That will disappear with the 2-story house. So it does affect their existing solar rights. If you have any questions, I'll answer them.
I don't have any questions, no.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, appreciate it. Just so it's clear what's before the council, we do have an updated resolution before the council. Everyone received that updated. It did not go out in the packet, but it is in the updated online version. Is that correct, Ms. Crawford?
That is correct. It's an updated resolution approving the request. So.
All right. We have a resolution before us granting 2 setback variances. Council, what would we like to do here?
Move approval.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Council.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Edberg, I think you were indicating something.
I'm not an attorney. Is our attorney able to respond to the legal case that was made in front of us?
I think it would be more appropriate to just, the poignant question to me is, do we meet the legal standard in our council's opinion as to whether or not we've met the standard for a variance? But I will let Mr. Gilchrist enlighten us on whatever he thinks would help us make an educated decision.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Yeah, just quickly in response to the concerns raised, you certainly do have a non-conforming section of your code, as all codes have, and inherent in that are restrictions about not being able to expand non-conforming uses. That's the nature of them. Generally, they're restrained because eventually they'll be phased out, commercial use in a residential area, that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that you're not able to grant a variance to allow for an expansion of a nonconforming use. It's just generally they don't have a right to expand a nonconforming use. So I disagree that somehow this has to be constrained to the confines of a nonconforming use and the limitations in your code associated with that. As with anything in your code, you have the potential to consider a variance for that, and as the mayor indicated, if it meets the standards, certainly within your discretion to grant those variances. So I think that's the primary. As far as the unique circumstances being created by tearing down the existing home, as I understand, the unique circumstances are the very small lot. And it's the size of the lot and dimensions of the lot that create the unique characteristics here, not the fact that the home's being replaced.
All right, further discussion on this. Councilmember Hughes, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to ask a little bit more about that. I'll be personal. We had a small remodel project, and we had a 2-foot setback, which we then changed to a 5-foot setback, and it would seem under what he was saying that I should have gone through the non-conforming use process on that rather than a variance on the land use or whatever instead, which it wasn't a problem. So I guess I don't know why it would be a problem in this case. I'm not making myself very clear because I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't seem like we do that ever. Go through the non-conforming use process when granting variances. I haven't seen that before. So I guess I don't, in terms of people remodeling or doing things with residential property. Sorry, I probably just threw that out because I didn't realize what we were, it was going to come up, and now you've got to think about it. I guess so, Mr. Mayor, I don't think I've ever seen that. We've done a lot of variances around here, and I don't think I've ever seen one come up as non-conforming land use when we've been addressing variances. I have to say the same thing 7 times. I like doing that.
That's good.
Mr. Mayor, just very
Please.
quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, so your variance authority exists for conforming uses and non-conforming uses. So a conforming use that wants to do something that doesn't quite conform, so they're proposing to do something that doesn't comply, that's the nature of a variance. We're not going to strictly apply this because there's a good reason in a particular circumstance not to apply that standard. So in this case, the fact that they're starting with a nonconformity, I guess my point is, doesn't exempt it from being eligible to have you consider a variance request for it.
All right. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution granting the 2 setback variances, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The resolution passes. Item 9, discussion. We have nothing scheduled. Item 10, communications from the city manager. Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I have a couple slides, if you can help me out. Okay, our fire rescue boat is being built. It is almost done. It's about 1 month out, so I thought we'd give you some progress update photos. It is in Canada, so it will be quite the journey to go get it, meet them at the border. But wanted to provide you an update on that. And then lastly, the Northeast Youth and Family Services Board terms. We received an update on that. They're not annually, and they don't run with the calendar year at this point at NYFS. So they are July 1 through June 30th. And so Councilmember Hughes will remain on the NYFS board through June, and then Councilmember West will take over after that. So we'll need to tweak a little bit our annual appointment process, as they are 3-year terms at NYFS, but just wanted to give an update on that, and then I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Coppy to give an update on the downtown mobility and parking study.
Mayor, members of the council, if you remember back in November, the project team gave council an update where the process was at. Following that, in late December or late November, the project management team went over a number of different concepts of throughout the downtown with the steering committee for their review. Based on their review and recommendations, we also took it to Main Street and the EDC in early January for their review and feedback as well. So based on those those opportunities for kind of the public feedback for at least the core downtown area, the project team is making revisions based on those the feedback that we heard. We'll be bringing that back to an upcoming steering committee meeting next Thursday with some revisions to review. And then based on those revisions, the steering committee will make recommendations that we would go to a public open house on March 7th, where we'll hear more feedback from any interested party in the community, including the downtown area and residents and visitors. So we'll take all of that feedback and kind of come up with a final design concept that we would then bring back to council for your kind of final review and blessing before we would finalize the report. That's anticipated, later this spring to bring back that final report for adoption or acceptance by council based on those steering committee recommendations. Ms. Crawford, if you have anything to add.
Thank you, Mr. Copy. I would just add that the kind of every presentation and every version of the draft concepts are available on our website to take a look at, as well as just additional descriptions of everything. Everything is in a draft form at this point. We're still looking for feedback, whatever way we receive that. So I would encourage the community and those watching either to attend the open house. We will also have an online opportunity for people to speak or people to provide their feedback who are not able to attend the open house. But really, this is a study that is the outcomes are to be informed, kind of been built by the community. So just wanted to give an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we get off this agenda item, I just want to echo what Ms. Crawford and Mr. Copy have said, because I've gotten feedback from the community, and there seems to be this misnomer that this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this on Washington Ave. We're going to do this on Clark. We're at the early brainstorming stages of this project. There's been nothing before the council, certainly nothing that we've approved. We're in the dreaming phase. What would be great? What would look pretty? What would be nice? What's functional? What's not? So encourage residents and business owners to take advantage of these open houses, and we want to hear from you. I want to hear. My email address and phone number is available along with the rest of the council. That's the process. That's the stage that we're at. So if you hear residents saying they're going to do this or the council's going to do this, good, bad, or otherwise, we're nowhere close to final decisions. So be a part of that conversation if you feel strongly about it. And I know everyone sitting up here wants to hear from the residents and business owners. So we encourage that. And with that, we're going to move to item 11, the closed session. We are entering into a closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, Subdivision 3A, to evaluate the performance of the city manager. At this time, we will dismiss others in attendance. The conclusion of this meeting will not be video recorded.